All right, it's top of the hour. We're here to get started. Once again, welcome everybody. My name is Doreen Morin Van Dam, and I'm the moderator for today. We are thrilled that you're here today to be part of a conversation that Marsha Acker and Mark Franz will have about leaders as facilitators. We come together today because the celebration of a book that Marsha wrote. She wrote The Art and Science of Facilitation, and this virtual book tour is a celebration of that. But what is the art and science of facilitation? I'm going to assume that most of you know what it is, but let me just read you the description of the book, just in case you have been invited by somebody and you have not had a chance to read it. The Art and Science of Facilitation is your guide to moving your team further forward using the groundbreaking 5 guiding principles of the facilitation stance. For anyone ready to lead with self-awareness and group insight, this book is designed to help you navigate group dynamics so that your team can work more efficiently and effectively in a truly collaborative environment. Welcome, Marsha and Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So before we give you the first question, I want to make sure that everybody knows a little bit more about you. So I'm going to share your bios with all of our viewers today. So Marsha Acker is a professional facilitator, executive, and team coach, the founder and CEO of TeamCatapult. She uses systems thinking, structural dynamics, dialogue, and agility to help teams collaborate and align with clarity, purpose, and vision. Marsha is a facilitator of meaningful conversations, a host of dialogue, and a passionate agilist. Through her keynotes, books, workshops, and leadership coaching, she empowers people to grow their leadership range and show up authentically in their lives and work.
Thank you.
All right. And then Mark Franz is a video game industry veteran who's worked across multiple aspects of video game development. He successfully scaled organizations from 20 to 3,000 and had the opportunity to help lead some amazing games, including Ultima Online and League of Legends. He's currently the director of production for Vela Games in Dublin, Ireland, working on the company's multiplayer online cooperative game, Project V. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
That's very exciting. Did I say that right? Is it Vela Games? I forgot to ask that question.
Vela, it's a constellation. So it's close, Vela.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's Vela Games, guys. Yeah. Sorry about that. I thought I was all set with that. So I'm going to just go ahead and start the question. The first question is actually for Marsha, and that should totally kick off this conversation today. I'm very excited. So Mark, why did you want Mark here today?
So as we were thinking about the book tour, this virtual book tour that we've been on, we've kind of been looking at all different aspects of, what does it look like what is facilitation and what's the art of it and how do you grow competencies? And last week we also talked a little bit about, conversation and its role in leadership. But this last piece was a little bit around leaders as facilitators, and I hold a really strong belief that facilitation is a leadership skill. So I've known Mark for I think about 8 or 9 years now, and when I think about, for me, there's a mental picture about thinking about leaders who facilitate. Mark is one of the ones that just pops up to the forefront for me as sort of a mental model of what that looks like. I think that generally leaders, and I wrote about this in the book, I think there's lots of polarities that leaders get stuck in the middle of, like holding a view about leadership and then trying to balance that with what does facilitation look like. So I see leaders struggle with the idea that like collaboration just takes too much time. Like they might believe it's helpful, but don't want to sacrifice, or it's just not worth it. So there's the struggle of, do I lead, or do I ask or collaborate, or do I just plow ahead and make decisions? I also think I see leaders really struggle with the concept of what does it look like to step back and let something come from the team versus step forward and make moves and set direction. And I think Mark balances that really well. In addition to having like this real focus on effectiveness and team high performing teams. And I've watched, Mark, you over the years really hone this craft. I love how you talk about craft in general, but hone this craft of leading and facilitating and creating space for conversations. And, bringing forward things that are, potentially underneath the surface for a team and bringing that forward. So I wanted people to get to meet you. I wanted you to be able to share your story, because I think in that space of grappling with some of those polarities, I think it'd be great for people to have other stories to pull from. So that's a little bit of a long-winded why, but yeah, that's why, as we talk about leaders in facilitation.
Wow, thank you.
So I'm going to ask you that question, Mark. Why did you say yes?
So I think Marsha was so impactful on me and my career. And I think my ability to find an authentic form of leadership that matched my needs to deliver value, but also have tremendous respect for the team and leverage the passion and creativity of the team to create something awesome. And it was difficult because you see so many different leadership models around you. Some that are extremely assertive, some that are a bit passive, and just anything in between. And I think from learning about facilitation, which is its own whole story, it felt right. And so when Marsha, asked me to do this, which was, by the way, I was like, no, I do not do. Of course, for Marsha, it's been so impactful on me and my career. I was like, absolutely. And I'd love to share my experience.
That's great. I just want to remind the viewers that are here, people that are here live with us, thank you for being here live. If you have questions at any time for the panelists, about 45 minutes into this conversation, we're going to stop and we're going to take your questions. So if you have them, right, the bottom of your screen is a Q&A. It's separate from the chat. If you want to put your questions for Mark or for Marsha or for both of them in there, that way I'll pull them up when it's time, and I'll be happy to ask your questions if you have them. So just wanted to throw that out there. So let's talk about Agile Facilitation. I would love to know how you first got introduced to Agile Facilitation. What was your journey with facilitation like? And this question's for you, Mark, including setbacks and successes. Are you willing to share kind of what that journey was like?
Yes. So I was with Games for about 11.5 years, and where I learned about this was at a really pivotal point where we're scaling dramatically, just growing and growing the size of the teams. And I was a senior producer responsible for development. And we're looking at a lot of different frameworks and practices that we could help as we're scaling out the organization. And there's a partner in crime of mine named Ale Otterson. He's from Iceland. I've known him for years. I've never pronounced his name correctly, but it's Ale Otterson. He, interestingly enough, proposed this idea that we look into Agile Facilitation. And it was just so precise in terms of what it was addressing for our teams and our leadership teams that I went to Nebraska, I want to say, to take a training course. And it was interesting because I think I had a sense of what it was. I'd read about it. And I was just kind of checking out, does this Marsha person know, what she's doing? Would we be able to take her back into to write and get training there? And I think it was like 3 hours into the training, I was already in awe and humbled by what I was learning. It was just so different and new, and I knew applicable. So long story short, we brought this training in and started training out a huge portion of production in these skills. And then, fast forward, I think I had some early really huge successes with it, and just kind of, from a set of skills, changing the way that we do conversations, just simply that was refreshing. People really loved it. It felt more participatory and collaborative just in the action of the way that you frame a well-facilitated meeting. But when I started to understand that you could see below the surface and create a safe environment where you could address that, that was where I really started to see true high performance begin to emerge. And so it just seemed like this was just amazing. So I went deeper and deeper into training and brought more and more depth of that training into the teams. I definitely had some setbacks. I think some things were just really easy, just those practices. I think the two, if I describe two setbacks, one was being judgmental. And I think for me, I didn't realize just how judgmental I was until actually in Nebraska, where that was an eye opener. I was like, okay, so, but when you're facilitating a team and you're taking the facilitative stance for the team, you have to be totally neutral, and there's a power to that role. And I have a very expressive face, so even on Zoom where we're doing remote meetings, even today, someone was like, they could just tell when my face kind of went like this, like, what's going on? I was like, oh, nothing. People can read what's going on. And if there's a group of people that, you judge these people as elevated, like you always respect their opinion. And maybe they're people that you just generally label as non-constructive. The team is going to read that and it's going to affect the conversation, and you're going to miss out on the value that everyone is bringing to that conversation and possibly overvalue parts of the conversation. And the team will do this because of your interaction with them. And so I think it was through facilitation I realized just how judgmental I could be. And so I think there's a lot of work to actually remove that. And I mean, I think the awesome thing is it doesn't just, when you learn to do that through facilitation, it doesn't just affect when you're a facilitator, it affects when you leave the office. It affects just the way you interact with anyone, on this planet. And so I think that's just been a beautiful gift that I've gotten from that. But it was an early setback that I had to address. And I think the other setback, and I think a lot of people have expressed this as a setback. It was great working with a lot of the teams with this. People just embraced these approaches to dialogue. But when you're suddenly in like you're working directly with your peers or the most senior management, it just suddenly seems so high risk. It's just like, oh, I can't do this. This is serious business with serious people. I can't introduce facilitative skills in here. It's just going to seem like a game. And I think, the first time I tried to do that, I said, can we try something new? And they're like, sure. I just choked. And I was like, never mind. And I just went back. I just did it. We just did a normal format where we discussed it. And I was like, what a lost opportunity. And I think the thing I learned there is when I, did go back and I said, this time I'm really going to do it. They loved it. It's playful and people love to play. It's collaborative and people love to collaborate. So, I think those are two setbacks in general that I experienced, and both of them were just learning, one, really learning how to suspend judgment, and not just in the moment, but just in general. Another is learning that everyone likes to play, everyone likes to collaborate. So,
Mark, you've one of the things that I think is so just stands out for me in that story that you just shared is people will often ask, like, well, how do you do X, right? Fill in the blank. How do you do X with a leadership team or an executive team or the team or my team, that's used to seeing something for me? And I think that it's not about how do you do the thing, it's what do you believe about the thing. And I think that comes forward in the story that you just shared about if you believe that there's something valuable to it, then it frames how you introduce it, and it frames how you hold the space for a group to do that, versus if you're not sure or you're holding back or you question the validity of it or your role in it, I think then then it's harder. It feels harder. So that's what I hear in the contrast
Yeah.
of you describing, like getting ready to do something, going, never mind, versus like it's fun, and it'll be worthwhile, and just trust me, and like we're going somewhere, but it, it might feel like we're on a windy path to get there. So.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. I think I did go into that early conversation of believing they wouldn't accept it, and thus questioning the value of it. And the next time I went in there, I was like, oh, of course they're going to love this, So
yeah. Well, and love it, and there's a reason why. It's not, just
we're gonna have a real conversation. And I think that, well, when I fast forward from those experiences, and I had, so many amazing experiences along the way. I think what it's led me to is, I'm at a startup company here in Ireland, and we have huge aspirations. We're going to make something huge, and right now we have a small team, but we're going to be growing that over the course of this year, and we've had an opportunity to seed these values, these concepts, and this mindset into the way we operate from the start. And I just think that's amazing. So one of our development pillars is every voice is heard. And then we elaborate on what that means and the value of it. And it shows up in all of our practices. And it's just been kind of an amazing journey to be able to actually, help plant that seed in a company that shares that set of values from the start. That's
really amazing.
Yeah. But you Marsha, you did some, we had some pretty interesting experiences. I think there was one of the most impactful facilitated experience for me was, I was in a very high stakes situation so I was responsible for product, but I was also responsible for a portion of the discipline of production. And I needed us to go in a certain direction. I needed, like the company, better put, and I believe that today, and I believe that then, needed to go in a slightly different direction. And a lot of people were on board, and there was a lot of resistance to it. And I was just, I'd gone through the training, but I think in the moment, I was just feeling accountability for this, and just knowing that this was the right way to go, and flustered at the resistance we're receiving. And Marsha entered the picture and facilitated a discussion where the team, who just a few people just lashed out at me, that I'm not listening to them. And I was like, I've been listening to you for the last hour. What are we talking about here? And Marsha said it so that I couldn't be seen. And there's another leader in the organization there that also couldn't be seen. And we just had to sit there quietly and listen. And Marsha facilitated a conversation that wasn't about the logic about the decision. It was about the emotional, personal impact of what we were describing. And I had not heard that. I had not heard any of that. And I think people were really, really frustrated with me for not hearing that and not addressing that. And I think at that point, I didn't view that as something I needed to do. And when Marsha then put me in the center of the room, thank you, Marsha.
You've not ever left that.
Yeah. Put me and this other leader in the center of the room, and had everyone now just listen to us, say what was going on for us. What I'd heard just blew my mind. And I was blown away. And I expressed that. I was like, I didn't know that you felt this way. I want us, to be the greatest leadership team we can be. And I think this gets here. And I didn't know it was causing so much pain. And I just closed my eyes, and because I couldn't believe I was in that situation. It was the most vulnerable situation I've ever been in my life. And when I opened my eyes, it was just one person after another saying, I'm in. I'm in. And so this whole thing happens and everyone's like, we're in, we want to do this. And, I think you took a break, you ushered us out. And I just turned to you and I said, what just happened? And you said, leadership is what just happened. And it was just like, that was such a pivotal moment for me. I think informed so much of how I think I used to be very, move, action, logic. We have data. This is what we should do. Like, follow that. Why would anyone question this? And I really wasn't paying attention to, the personal impact of these things. And if you can't surface that, it's still going to be there. And that was, I think, a huge thing that Marsha taught me.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. I remember it. I remember vividly. I think, from the facilitation perspective, I don't actually remember what was supposed to be happening in the room, but I remember, being a bit towards the back of the room, and you all were in a conversation, and it was just instantaneous. So in structural language, a lot of move and oppose, just move, and oppose, pose, and the heat was instantly rising in the room. Like, I could feel it in the back. And I remember thinking, like, everybody's talking past one another, and it was, you taught, it's common, right? It's not an uncommon pattern. Like, you're not hearing me, so I'll speak louder or I'll say it differently. And I think that was happening for everybody. And so in that moment, what I just did was shift dynamics. So if you weren't there, then people couldn't be, at you, which I think is potentially what it seemed like was happening. It was a bit like a ganging up, but they just, they then they had a conversation. And then you and the other person got to have a conversation about what it was like to hear it. But I think what was, I vividly remember much of that conversation. I could probably tell you where everybody was in the room at that moment, because I just, it was like the heat came down. And I think in lots of different ways, everybody started hearing a different perspective, and something new was coming out of it. That wasn't so much about the decision anymore, but I think about being heard. So it was beautiful to watch. But I meant very much about what I said. It was this moment of, well, actually, if I think back to what I said in the very beginning about how facilitation, like the ability to step back and create space for a team, feels really hard. I think for it would be hard for me too. I'm not immune to that. But I think then to really shift the dynamics and hear what's just able to listen in a different way, and then watch what's able to come from that, like the momentum and the alignment that can happen when you create a little bit of space to be with breakdown, which is for sure what was happening in that moment.
And I think in learning, like leveraging a leadership skill with facilitation, hopefully I don't get there again. And I'm hearing both the present agenda, but also what's going on underneath the surface, and I'm able to safely pull that out. I've definitely been in meetings where someone just pops off, like everything's super calm and everything's cool, and then someone just explodes at the end of the table, and you're like, what just happened? And I now see that as more systemic, that it's there's some pressure valve. It's not the person. In fact, I thank the person for expressing that steam, but it's what's happening in the system that's allowing that like you just said, it just went hot so fast. And it's because I think in that case I had been just whatever, just pushing it back down, and it's there. It's going to stay there, and unless you can surface it, again, I say this probably every day, you can't deal with it. So I think as a leader, as I use facilitation skills, part of just constantly hearing and allowing those those undercurrents to surface, and hearing the whole story, not just the logic story.
Yeah. Well, like, how do you bring that forward now? Like, how do you create space for opposition?
Well, I mean, if I'm not hearing it, I'm worried. And so there are a lot of cases where you're soliciting it, genuinely saying, well, but what, what isn't right about, what risk do we have about this? What would, what's wrong with this approach? So I think a lot of it is just actually soliciting opposition if you're not getting it. I'm very uncomfortable when I'm not hearing opposition, because I think one of the concerns is, just kind of reflecting back on experience that I've had in the past, is that it's there, and you're not hearing it. But there are occasions where it's just everyone is just absolutely on board. But just the same, I'll attempt to really solicit that and bring that out. And when I think when you hear opposing views, it's well, you talk about your book. It's a gift. Right, that it's necessary to actually move the conversation forward, and it adds so much magic to what you're doing.
I love the word magic. And it's such a different place for me, because I could go back 15 or 20 years, and I worked to manage it out of the room. I didn't want conflict. I certainly didn't think I knew how to work with it if it came up. But I do think that reframing opposition and conflict, and somebody being able to voice to say that they see it really differently, is I think that's one of the keys to that magic.
Yeah, and I think it's also
no, I was going to say, I'm going to take 1 second in here just to remind everybody, this conversation is amazing. If you have questions for the panelists, put them in the Q&A, and I'm going to keep going. I have questions, but this is riveting. And a couple of comments were, thank you for sharing both of your stories on both sides of the aisle for the facilitation, that you were just sharing that story, Mark, and then Marsha, for you giving that feedback on your side and how that felt. That's really impactful.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say one more thing about opposition, and it's again, if it's high stakes and you have to get this across the finish line, and you're receiving a lot of negative sentiment from the team, it's how are you framing that? And I think it's really easy to frame it as a threat. You're like, well, oh God, if you're going to prevent me from achieving the goals, you're going to prevent the team from achieving the goals. And I think that's where it's what you talk about over and over again in your book, which is it's switching to curiosity. And I think that switch to, well, just asking like what's going on, is authentic curiosity, right? So because I've seen theatrical curiosity, and everyone knows it. Like they know when they see it, but people really also do understand authentic curiosity, which is, well, what's important about that, or what are the, okay, well, let's pause for a minute. What could go wrong? I think it gives. I can't know everything, but collectively we have a better chance of understanding everything. And so when opposition comes up, I think by just immediately, and it is a thing. I think for me, it's a behavioral pattern you have to have discipline around, which is, just switch to curiosity. And I think what you get is it doesn't become hot, it becomes collaborative and problem solving when it's authentic curiosity. And then it's more of a problem to solve and to think through, and a collaborative discussion. Whereas I think if you view it as a threat, well, first off, you may never really understand what the risk was from the, that the opposition was voicing, which I think is a real risk, but you never actually got to then take that and synthesize that into your plans if you needed to.
I love the frame of looking at it from a curious perspective. I think it's so, you were talking about body language earlier, and we can all sense when somebody's faking it or playing in a theater, and or you just feel it. Like, I don't know where that question came from, but it didn't feel great.
Right. Yeah.
felt like there was an agenda behind it. But I do, you also point to the fear, and I think that's, at least in my experience, it's one of the biggest things that sits underneath. Like the team won't succeed, or I won't succeed, or I'll look bad, or I have failed, and somebody will hold me accountable to that. Yeah.
Well, I just remembered that I forgot to let everybody know to stay to the end. We are giving away 2 signed copies of Marsha's book, The Art and Science of Facilitation. And I have a quick question for you, Mark. I know you read the book, and earlier you were talking about you went to this course on Agile Facilitation in Nebraska. Was that your first? And there might be some people here or rewatching this at a later point that are leaders, but have never heard or experienced Agile Facilitation. So you said within 3 hours, you knew you were going to try to figure out a way to get Marsha in, to get everybody, but what did it do? How did it feel? What was the eye-opening thing? What was it about Agile Facilitation and being in that room with Marsha, understanding leadership, being a leader in a company? What was it that you were missing, or what was it that you were attracted to immediately? Because there might be some people that are on this journey right now that want to get there and want to become that facilitator. They're already that leader, but they're having some troubles with their teams. How can you speak to that? I would love to know.
Well, I think so. I can look at this. Part of this is on reflection, but if you, a lot of my role is ensuring we're generating ideas for things we could do, or problems we could solve, opportunities we could go after, narrowing that down to options, and then making a decision, and then holding to that decision until we learn new information. So this is leveraging teams to have creativity and talent and skills, and arriving, well, what could we do? What should we do? Now, specifically, what options should we choose, and how should we decide it? And those are also critical, and you're leveraging a lot of people to do that. I'd seen a lot of agile product development work. It was following, I thought, good frameworks, good methodologies, but the conversations didn't seem right. They didn't feel like we were really surfacing everything, and that there are missed opportunities in those conversations. And so how do those conversations happen? And I've seen experiences where it's personality driven, or more kind of authoritative driven, but just by default. And I know no one really wanted that. And we saw something that actually allowed for a fully leveraging the team's thought and creativity to generate those options, narrow it down to the things we really should do, and then to get down to we're confident we're making a good decision. We've really explored everything, and we've had good conversations all along the way. That was what Agile Facilitation, the kind of the promise of it provided. And I think I went into it. I think I wrote on my card, what are your concerns about this class? I think I wrote, I hope this isn't derpy. So I wasn't, cocky at all. But I was like, is this really gonna do this? And when I say it was midway through that first day, I just felt like this is real. I thought I was just going in there to evaluate something I thought I knew about, and was learning. So basically was learning I don't know anything about how to have a fantastic, creative, powerful conversation. I did not know how to do that. And I was, an adult. So I think that was what really struck me. And I think I haven't known a person that, went through your training that didn't have the same kind of reaction to it. Sorry, Doreen, does that answer?
No, absolutely. And the follow-up question then is, so how has Agile Facilitation then impacted how you lead your teams?
It leads it in so many ways. again, like, we could talk about open and closed systems. We're in that ideation state or that narrowing state. I believe it captures the whole surface area of opportunities of what we could explore if done right. So the way it actually shows up is through a lot of inquiry and curiosity, and just effectively reading the room and trying to sense when maybe something isn't being spoken, or when a team isn't addressing something that's fairly obvious that's going on. And so with Agile Facilitation, let's say we're actually doing like release planning, and we're making these, pretty high stakes decisions about a product release. The argument feels really pretty intense, like what's actually going on there. And so I think Agile Facilitation, it taught me how to both understand how to stay in that, not retreat from it, but stay in that, because getting through that is going to make the team stronger. And it'll also surface something that's going on. It'll also allow you to get to the right answer, not the safe answer, or not the half answer. It'll get you to the right answer for the team. And for the product and for your audience. It allows you to go through that whole conversation and get there right. Then it allows you to improve the team by surfacing, addressing underlying challenges of the team. By the way, those issues could be systemic. They could be just, there's something the way the team is structured. They could be process oriented, or there could be just some misunderstanding or misalignment, or there could be issues where people just don't like the way we've been treated by someone else. They don't like the way that my last pull request was handled. And that feels disrespectful to me as an engineer. I haven't mentioned it, but then when we're in a planning session, when I disagree with this person, it gets a little bit hotter than maybe it should seem. And what you're finding out is that where you think you're talking about, should we release this or this, you're really talking about, I don't like the way that you handled my pull request. I think it's disrespectful to my skills and to me as a person. And so, and then allows you to actually come back and go, well, what should be some norms around how we actually, do our PRs, and allows you to cover this whole stack, and sometimes in the same meeting. So I think that's just the incredible power of Agile Facilitation. So in terms of it shows up, that's essentially how it shows up. And I just add one more thing. It is just a lot of curiosity and just a real lack of judgment.
I think what you're saying is so true about systemic things. Like I think I don't have a statistic to assign to it, but it feels like there's often when conflict emerges in the room, it's not about the thing that we're talking about right now. It's about something else.
Yeah.
Entirely different.
I have another question for you. How do you find Agile Facilitation to foster true connections and collaboration?
It's funny. I guess to me, it just it inherently does. It allows for, from a mindset perspective, deeply valuing the conversation and structuring those conversations so that there is real dialogue. And so what you could see is, in practice, the way that may show up is that you're going to see a very dynamic meeting. There may actually be movement in the room where people are, and instead of voting on something or just having a discussion, they're literally standing on a square that identifies their tribe or something, where they sit on a practice, a development practice, or on a product priority, like literally moving to, this is where I believe this is most important. And then you can visually see, oh, this is where kind of everyone stands. And so it gives you a lot of different approaches to having dialogue. And then it may then quickly morph into, one-on-one dialogue, right? Where just like two people are just talking to themselves. You break it up into pairs or into trios. And then you bring that back in the room. So you're having deeper interpersonal conversations and then surfacing those up to the larger conversation, and also giving a moment for people to just catch their thoughts. Just, take this moment and just write down your thoughts on this. And then we're going to bring that back into small groups and then into larger groups. So what I'm saying is it shows up as a very dynamic, I use the word playful. It feels more playful in terms of the conversations you're having. And it feels like you're getting, again, you're addressing the present agenda, which again could be release planning or practice or whatever that is, but also really allowing for a set of skills that allow you to safely tap into to more of the undercurrent of what's going on with the team.
Mark, all of our conversation around opposition and sort of its magic and its role and voice in this, I use the phrase a lot. I think we do just in the space of facilitation and coaching of like leaders creating space. And for me, that means like creating space for different voices. I love the all voices heard kind of pillar, but all voices are different voices or opposition. And I wonder, can you think of a time or maybe an example of when you felt opposition missing in some way? Like, how did you invite it, or what did you say? Because I think that sometimes that sentence or that way in which it gets invited, I think of myself as a really open person. I operate a lot in open systems, so I'm often asking people for input. And I've learned some lessons about it doesn't always mean that people are gonna oppose or bring a different point of view just because I'm asking. So yeah.
The silence is deafening, I think,
Yeah.
is a way that it can show up. Or and I mean, the problem is I'm struggling to find a time where I wasn't ultimately able to surface some. No, okay, I'll take that back. I think there was a time where I thought I was observing something, and when I asked them, am I, kind of like, yeah, kind of, yeah. And so, and I think there's a lot of silence around people expressing they didn't want to go there. And so I think from there, it's what was leading to that. And by the way, it also could just be, do we think this is important? And it could be that the team is just saying, I just don't think this is important. I'm really excited about the next thing. Yeah. And so I'm going to stand over and sketch until we get to that next thing. But where the opposition, again, it does, some of it is just in body language. It is there's just silence and, well, what's going on there? Is there, there was a team I was working with. So there was a team I was working with that I'm trying to avoid going into specifics, but let's just say they agreed with each other way too much. And so, but basically what ended up happening was I asked everyone to rate their ability to give and receive feedback on a scale of 1 to 5. So one was give feedback and the next one was receive feedback. And they were all just like 5s. We're great at giving and receiving feedback as a team. And this is a this is a critical creative part. And when they all basically came back with 5s, I said, great. So maybe we should write a news article about your excellence at giving and receiving feedback. And that's where one person went, all right, this is nonsense. What are we doing here? Like we are terrible at this. And that was like, okay, so tell me what's going on. And then it just kind of fell like dominoes. So I think it was, I think the reason I hesitated because it was a playful move on my part.
Yeah.
But it was just challenging that. And then finally someone was like, all right, you got us. We're lying through our teeth. And and we're able to have a real conversation there.
Yeah. Do you know what I love about that is injecting humor and fun and playfulness and like not feeling like you're calling anybody out or making somebody wrong. Like I think sometimes in this it can feel like we're getting it wrong because we don't give and receive feedback well, versus just asking people to become really aware of where they're at so that they can talk about it.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Thank you for that. We have a question that I'm going to ask in just a second. I want to remind everybody to stay. I have the names of the 2 winners. As soon as we're done with the Q&A, I'll be telling you who won a signed copy of Marsha's book. But the question is probably for both of you. It comes from Jeremy. It says, can you talk a little bit about navigating or establishing fear versus safety and safety when facilitating as a leader?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again? I just want to make sure I understand it.
Sure. So yeah, there were a couple of slashes there. Can you talk a little bit about navigating, establishing, I guess, navigating fear or establishing safety when facilitating as a leader?
So I guess if you're, is this fear from the team and safety for the team, or is this more about the facilitator?
I think about the facilitator. That's how I'm reading it. So that you have that personal, I guess, fear to step into that, but.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. You're definitely a presence, right? And you have an audience, and that could be very scary. And you can also have the entire team turn on you. Marsha's book, I think, addresses that a lot, and it talks about actual skills you can use to stand in the storm, but also if you're approaching it with the mindset that Marsha's outlining, you're less likely to have a team turn on you, because it's not about you. And I think that gets down to the fundamental thing of, Marsha talks about the process is not you. You are not the process. You are the facilitator of the process. And so it may sound strange, but it's removing your ego from the situation and really focusing on the team. And I found that, by the way, I'll come up with so like I have a thing this Friday it's a very large collaborative session, and I'm already mapping out, like, this is what we're going to do. I'll throw that entire thing away in a heartbeat. I planned for it, but I'm ready to just throw it away at a moment's notice. It doesn't matter that I plan these things. It doesn't matter what I think they should be talking about based on my preliminary discussions. It matters what's happening in that moment. And so I think if you're able to stay with the team and focus on them and kind of remove your judgment, your ego, your perfect plan, I think that's how I found comfort. And I think when the team does when the team does seem to suddenly be upset with you as a facilitator, it is Marsha, I'll hand it to you, but I think you do talk about just that, I'm hearing this, let's pause for a second here.
Yeah, I think there's exactly what you're talking about, which is being able to create that space. And then, I don't know, in some way, it's just remembering that it's not about you. So I think it's not uncommon, especially if you're doing some of that work to surface conflict and the things that are more difficult to talk about. It's not uncommon for the team to get upset with you as a facilitator. And I think, to your point earlier, Mark, some of that can be systemic. You're making me talk about something that I don't want to talk about, but I think where you can just find your center and just go, you know what, I'm just an easy target right now because maybe I'm the safe target, or to make this about somebody else in the room would be more difficult. The person that's facilitating the conversation just gets to take the brunt of it. but it's not about you. It's about what's happening in the group. It's about what's happening for that individual. And I think for you to remember that, I think then you have access. Like the goal of this is, Mark, you said it earlier, is just to be able to stay. Like, how do you stay, and then how do you help the team stay with it? So finding your center and then creating a space. So there's a lot of conversation about, safety and creating psychological safety. I think some of that comes from facilitation actions, whether you're the leader or just the facilitator of that group, where like people have to know and trust that when they tell you something that feels risky or courageous or brave or difficult, that it's not going to get used against them somewhere along the way. And I think used against them, it can very seldom do I think it becomes like somebody gets demoted or they get taken off the team. I think much more is people get factored out of a conversation, or they don't get asked for their opinion next time. So I think sometimes it's just really about being aware of where do you have bias, and how might you be handling the opposition that you're getting, or the conflict that's surfacing, and how do you not make it about you?
That's powerful. We don't have another question, but I have one for you. Didn't come in through Q&A, and that'll be a great wrap up. After the next question, I will announce the winners of the book. We are here to celebrate the art and science of facilitation, right? Mark, who would you recommend this book to? Who needs to read this book? Where in their journey should they read this? Who, I'm assuming leaders, but maybe I shouldn't even have said that. Who should read this book? Who is it for?
Who's it for? So when I read this book, I think there's so many great candidates for reading this book, and it's anyone who is an Agile practitioner. So this is someone who is, we'll call like Scrum Master, Agile coach, anyone in product management, and it's anyone who, when I was talking earlier, you can have these, you can have a beautiful framework and wonderful methodologies. This is teaching the skills to actually have the dialogue that fuels all of the content of those things. So, I think this is where anyone in that space should do that. But I'd also say it's anyone who wants to learn how to leverage, how to grow fantastic teams and make beautiful products, bring value to the world. And you're doing that with people. So like a team or organization. It's any leader in that position. And there's that book, Say Anything, Marsha.
Yeah.
Beautiful case studies about just the incredible impact of people just hearing anyone in the organization and having that safety net to do that. And this is really the skill set to do that. So I think it's anyone in there, anywhere in the earlier the better. I'd say to read this. And I don't think you have to, my takeaway is I don't know that you have to have a lot of Agile background and knowledge to read this book and really take advantage of it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. So let me find out. We have two winners of 2 signed copies of the book, The Art and Science of Facilitation. The winners are Barb Weber and Jeremy Hansen. So
nice.
Yay. Email Patty, P-A-T-T-I, at TeamCatapult.com. That would be great. Oh, she's already put her email address in there. So please give her your details so we can send out the book to you. Congratulations to both of you for winning a signed copy of this book. I want to remind you that the book is available at theartandscienceoffacilitation.com. And one of the things that we are looking for that Marsha would love, if you have read the book, even if you've read parts of it, love a review on Amazon about the book. That would be great if you have read the book and you had something to say. Certainly that would help Marsha out. Certainly would love to read it, but also would help boost that. I have a final question for both of you, Mark and Marsha. What encouraging word do each of you have for someone at the start of the facilitation journey?
I guess I'm just so excited for you. It had such a deep impact on me and shaped so many of the ways that I see the world, right? So I'm responsible for product and ensuring that we're making a resonant product. I mean, that's my day in, day out. But it's infused that to where I have a blast doing this. I feel confident working with teams and understanding what's going on. And this book was such a huge part of it. So my encouraging words are, I'm extremely excited that you're jumping on this journey.
I would just say get started. I think there's something to like facilitation is a craft. I think one of the things that happens in day-to-day interaction and conversations is we think we're really good at it. And it's not that we're not, but there is a little bit of an art and science, I think, to what's happening, and that creates space for those really impactful conversations. So, and I think the only way to do it is to do it. We talk in our workshops all the time about, like, we teach principles. I mean, that's really what the book is intended to do, is put some of those principles out into the world. I think there's principles, and I think there's mindset, and there's inner work. But then there's just the practice of it and the goof ups along the way that will invariably come. They do for all of us every day. So yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you, for the conversation. If there's anything else that you want to bring forth that we haven't talked about, this would be a great opportunity. If not, Marsha, I'm going to hand it to you before I say thank you to all of those who were here.
Mark, I just want to say thank you. We could go on another hour. I love talking with you and hearing your stories. Thank you for agreeing to come do this. For those of you listening, Mark's name is in the book in the back around the acknowledgement. So, it was partly working with you, and we had a conversation along with Jeff one night about, I was like, oh, I'll write a book, and you were like, write the book. So it definitely provided a bit of a kick in the pants. So I just thank you for then. Thank you for years of friendship, and it's so lovely to hear your stories. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. You've had such an impact on my life, and so I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right.
And thank you to those who are still here, those of you who attended live or who just watched us on the replay. We appreciate you. We see wonderful, lovely comments from everybody about how much they've learned about facilitation, leadership. And if you have only watched this, go back and watch the previous conversations that Marsha had with her faculty, as well as with IC Agile and other friends in the industry. They have been eye-opening to everybody who's been here. And this one, thank you so much, Mark. I love that you share so many personal stories of both success and failure that you learned from. So that is wonderful. Again, if you have not read the book, Art and Science of Facilitation.com, we'd love your review about the book once you do. And thank you again for joining us here today. And let's wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.